Oh, from New York, and Kansas City. You are listening to Extra Time, driven by Continental. From my basement, I am Andrew Wiebe with my partners in soccer, David Goss, Matt Doyle. We start with the Producing Anders reminder of the day. Did you guys know, you probably haven't heard, wouldn't have seen it on Twitter, definitely no one in the know that was on a media conference call with Commissioner Don Garber would have told you this. They would have kept it to themselves and hoarded this information that the MLS season now starts April 17th. Did you know?
So the only thing I was more offended by than every single person that I follow on Twitter tweeting this out was you thinking you were better than everyone by being the one person who was like, I'm going to do snarky joke about this. Did you know the season's starting on the 17th? And Jonathan Tannenwald nailed you for it. That's why he's the GOAT.
That is not true.
You got rinsed by Tannenwald, Weave.
That is not true at all.
Go, Tannenwald.
Jonathan,
that's why he's the goalkeeper.
Jonathan, you know I love you. You know I respect you. You know that I think that your work on the National Soccer Hall of Fame, player voting and screening committees is top notch. But you did not rinse me in any way. Come on, we're just making jokes out here. Everybody can tweet it. I get it, man. I get it. Look, but the transfer window is open as well. But again, April 17th, that is now the date to circle in your calendar. That is when the MLS season starts, and preseason will kick off in a couple weeks now, and we'll be rolling. We'll be headed toward games. That's ultimately what we all want. Coming up on this show, Extra Time, driven by Continental. Did you like no comments on the intro, by the way? I felt like that was a little.
It was. I actually like that.
Sneaky little end around. I was thinking about it on the drive to drop my kids off this morning. I was like, technically, a majority of us are in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can do it for you guys.
So Derek Alishman tweeted us, and I thought his was pretty good. He said you could do from Kansas City to New York, because your partners in soccer are here and you're there.
My instinct is to reverse that because it sounds
clearly
better. Oh, from New York
to Kansas City
and
everywhere around the world, going out to listeners all across the globe.
Yeah. By the way, I have an idea. Can I just throw this out there? Yeah. You just prompted it. I've been thinking about this, that we should have, I always liked those like maps that you put up in your house, or that you had at like the restaurant that you go to wherever, you're on vacation on a road trip with your family, you walk into some restaurant and they've got the map with the thumbnails in it.
Like the balloon thing.
I'm like, could we do that for Extra Time? Could we see because we have people hit us up and like, hey, I'm in Vietnam, or hey, I live in our fan base in Hungary. Fan base might not be the right word. The people that listen to us and tolerate us twice a week.
I think we're pretty strong in Norway and Hungary. I think those and England might be our best European countries.
The Christian Nemeth effect.
I just want to know where the Peter Vermees effect. Yeah, the Peter Vermees effect. I want to know where our clusters are. So that's something we'll have to think about. Maybe there's like an online solution for all of that.
Can I just get you guys a little more hype for the first game of MLS, April 17th? That day also is International Ford Mustang Day, International Haiku Poetry Day, and for Doyle, it's also International Malbec Day.
Not just for Doyle?
No, you're not.
I'm a huge Malbec guy.
Yeah, me too.
You are more. I'm more of a red blend guy. So
that makes it boxed wine really.
Yeah. Doyle doesn't like any strong tannins on him. He likes everything just mixed.
That is actually.
All right. Let's get to it. We have a big show. New DP in Austin. Lucho Acosta. Red Bulls signed a 14-year-old who they really, really like. The CCL draw is out. I don't know how that got fourth billing, and there's a new U.S. Open Cup format. Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic is also going to stop by to talk Atlanta United, and we have an MLS story time for you on this episode of the podcast. Tony Sanneh, he is a legend of this game. He's a legend of MLS. He's a legend of the national team. He did some incredible things in Europe before people were doing that, at least Americans we're doing that, so we will chat with him in just a little bit. I personally am here because I did the whole, Minnesota United sort of origin, culture, birth story before they even kicked the ball in MLS, to talk to him about those old days with Buzz Lagos and Amos McGee and Manny and that whole scene in the Twin Cities that produced these really incredible players in a strange time and sustained professional soccer when all the odds were against them. I want to talk to him about that as well. So we'll get to that. Let's start here, though, with some things to read. You've got your U.S. national team depth chart up, Doyle. We'll get to that in a little bit on the show and kind of dig through where you think the competition battles are on MLSsoccer.com, so go check that out. Charlie Boehm, I thought, had a great explainer on the Brenner signing for FC Cincinnati and what it changes and what it might mean for the future of that market. The call-up, our sister podcast had Alexi Lawless on their most recent show, so go check that out as well. And I've got my reactions to that CCL draw coming on the site. But FC Cincinnati, praise be, they continue to produce extra time for us. Look at that. They're trying to sign Lucho Acosta, according to The Athletic. And I guess Pity Martinez and Brenner is done. And this is just sort of a feeding frenzy of names we weren't as familiar with. I mean, Brenner is a big name, an up-and-coming name, and names we know intimately. Lucho Acosta, Dave, to FC Cincinnati or DC United. They say they're interested too, reportedly. What do you think? Does it pique your interest, or are you like, no, that's a little bit too much recycling for me?
I understand the idea for FC Cincinnati of trying to get something you believe is a known quantity at least, or someone that doesn't have to fully settle into the league when you bring in a 21-year-old center forward for a lot of money who you want to hit immediately after seeing what happened to Locadia last year and Kubo last year. So you look at Acosta and you look at PT and you say, they already know the schedule, they know the travel, they know all those things. But I wonder about the production. Like with Lucho, obviously, Lucharoo and your whole fan base, Weavy.
It had live forever. It will live forever.
It will live. Clearly, it will live forever. Gerard Ninecamp's even a fan of it. It also had a lot of valleys. And so I look at Lucho and there's a lot of what I like that he can do. Like he's quick, low to the ground, clean on the ball, aggressive, I think, in combination play around the box, but doesn't control the pace of play. And so I wonder what his value is and how he fits in for FC Cincinnati. They need a 10. If it's Lucho Acosta or nothing, then I'd rather get Lucho Acosta. And the rumors coming out of Mexico are that I think it's Atlas. They really are not even looking for a transfer fee because they're just trying to get him off their books. So again, it's Cincinnati kind of trying to find the margins to work in and find the space. It's interesting if he went to DC. I want one of you to talk about it because I don't know how I wrap my mind around this. It's Losada now. It's not Olsen. They have Edson Flores. They have Yamil Assad. Do you think he fits there? Like, how do you see that move?
Second forward?
Do you think?
Is that not Flores' role?
Yeah.
I guess then he's the
Flores.
10 behind. Then he's like a 10-ish behind Flores. And they're just sort of like saying, hey, we're just going to stack up as much talent as we can. And I'm looking at the depth chart right now, and I don't know. I mean, those are the only two places you can play him. There's nowhere else that you can play him. So he has to fit one of those two spots.
Whereas with Flores, you could play him on a wing. Of course, Losada tends not to use wingers. He tends towards a 3-5-2 with a 10 underneath two forwards. I mean, just to put the numbers to it, Lucho's played a little over 2,000 minutes in Liga MX. He has 3 goals and 1 assist. Atlas are a really bad team, and it's not a great platform for any attacking player to show what they're worth. But you're supposed to, if you're that guy, if you're the 10, you're supposed to elevate the really bad team. And certainly that's what his job would be if he was coming to Cincinnati or DC United in this role. For 6 months, for the back half of 2018 and really for the back half of 2016, he was brilliant. He was just absolutely incredible to watch. But for most of his MLS career, he was not a super effective soccer player. And that's the case in Liga MX as well.
And Doyle, I think about his peak with Rooney and Rooney's ability and kind of instincts in MLS to drop deep and sort of create himself.
Yep.
And Brenner is a fox in the box. Get him chances, he will score. But it's not that same setup. And so it could be good for Lucho because if Kubo is able to find his form, if Barrial is something, whatever it is, it's a different setup than DC. So I don't want to put all of that in. But if the keys are Lucho and Rooney work, so now Lucho and Brenner will work, it doesn't seem like for like. And that's the part that's a bit awkward.
You feel for Lucho in this conversation as we talk about it, because that Lucharoo era was really, I mean, it was inspirational. You know, it was so inspirational that he was about to go to PSG.
Yeah.
Like, I feel for Lucho, like this sort of back and forth for him. If he's looking back at this in his career, he's like, my God, I was on the brink, man. I was on the brink. And then to end up at Atlas, look, nothing against Atlas, but they haven't, you know, that wasn't going to be anywhere close to the same platform for him. And now to come back in this way, I mean, it's just, I hope it works. If Cincinnati does it, I hope it works. If DC does it, I hope it works. That's generally my viewpoint on almost every transfer in this league, knowing that there's going to be a number of times it absolutely doesn't work. I want it to work because I want the entertainment value. I want it to work because I want every one of these teams to play at the highest possible level they can to push each other. But Lucho doesn't necessarily seem like an inspiring signing necessarily for Cincinnati. It feels like kind of what they said, which is we're looking at the market, we're finding inefficiencies, and we want to take advantage of those because of the way it's working right now with COVID and because of the window closing in Europe. And if that's the case and it works, I mean, applause to you. They've got an uphill battle with Brenner too, because the amount of money that they paid for him, the experiences he has. I was thinking about this last night. If I'm a young Brazilian guy living in Sao Paulo, I've spent a lot of time around that training facility. It's incredible. Not saying FC Cincinnati doesn't have the facilities. Sao Paulo is not the same as Cincinnati. And you're dropping a guy in there on 2 wooden spoons and putting a ton of pressure on him. There's not really time to be like, yo, Brenner, chill. Like, you've got a year. We've got other guys to handle that load. Like, you just kind of pick it up and where you can and get comfortable. And by the time next year hits, you're the man. Like, he's got to be the man right now.
I agree with you.
They're going to be really bad. That's hard. It's just hard.
But I don't think that's unquestionable. Brazil is the best league in the Americas, and he poured in goals in that league. It's a physical league. That's one of the things people struggle with in MLS. I don't actually, João Paulo last year, but Brazil to MLS is not a common pathway that we've seen. And so it is unique. And I don't think it's unfair to say that he can be a star in year one.
He can. I'm not saying he's not able to do that.
I think the other thing is, and it's really hard to see right now because we don't know a lot of this, is he may not be a DP if this young player rule comes in and he fits under that number. And Lucho Acosta, if he comes without a transfer fee, he might not be. And Locadia might be gone. So there may be more talent around this. It may not just be everything's on Lucho and Brenner's shoulders, and that's how it works.
That's a good point. We'll have to see what shakes out with FC Cincinnati. Lucho Acosta, do you like him, Cincinnati fans? Do you want him? DC, are you saying, wait, he's coming back to us? Let us know. 401-2060-MLS, extra time at MLSsoccer.com. Reports, rumors, somewhere in between. Cristian Pavon reportedly rumored to rejoining the Galaxy. That's great news. What was it? They said 50% of his rights were going to change hands here in this transaction.
It's unclear at this point, but that is the initial report, and this has been kind of on the front burner, but also weirdly under the radar since the end of the season. So I think before we start throwing out numbers, let's see if some of the more reliable outlets down there
look
up
at you.
here.
Just keep us responsible. That's
yeah,
right.
Keep us. I don't trust anything until Tom Bogert tweets it. That is my new policy.
But
at Tom Bogert on Twitter, MLSsoccer.com zone.
We can say the purpose for Cristian Pavon in the Galaxy is for him to play for the Galaxy, right? Yeah. This is not a winner move.
Yeah, he's not a buy and then sell unless he absolutely blows up and you're getting like a Miguel Almiron type of deal, which, I mean, Pavon is that type of talent, so it could happen. But if this happens, if they get Pavon back, it's like you already know he's one of the best players in the league. Like, you have a DP that you do not have to worry about for like 8 years, given his age and productivity. Like, just sign him, get him in. That is a foundational piece that few other teams in MLS can match.
I felt like this was just a waiting game for the Galaxy. I mean, the way that everything had happened with Boca, it just kind of felt like this was inevitable. This is where Pavon said he wanted to be, and now you're just sort of waiting until it happens.
So we got to read this one from Anders, which is he's hoping to follow in Zlatan's footsteps and launch his career from the MLS platform. He'll probably leave Sirian scoring when he's 40.
Right. I mean, in terms of players developed in MLS, like almost exclusively in MLS, like Alphonso Davies number 1, Zlatan Ibrahimovic probably number 2.
Well, to be fair, his knee was new.
That's true.
That knee hadn't done anything in Europe. That knee,
American made.
Yes.
That's science.
That knee was homegrown. That was homegrown. That was new tissue.
Driven by Continental.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Austin FC is still doing work. Claudio Reyna says they're looking to fill the 3rd DP spot in the summer, but they filled the 2nd one today. Officially, they had the press conference, everything. Tomas Pochettino is a DP. He was like an 8/ maybe a 10, but more of like a box-to-box guy. Talleres is where he came from. They're reporting, the club is reporting that it was $2.5 million. Which seems like, that seems like a pretty darn good deal. There were a lot of reports about River and Boca and perhaps Europe being in for him. He's a 25-year-old central midfielder, as I said. How does he fit into their roster? What do you think? I like their roster. I like what they're doing, and this makes sense to me, Doyle. What do you think?
It makes a lot of sense to me. And regarding the fee, and I'm sure we'll talk about this sort of thing with Felipe a little bit, a lot of South American teams are struggling. So it's a happy hunting ground for MLS teams right now, and Austin have clearly done some good work down there already. And Pochettino hopefully will be the latest addition. I haven't seen a lot of them. As soon as the deal crossed the finish line, I got DMs from a couple of my friends who are in analytics, and one was like, "Gee, I don't know. It's tough. Like, he's a good player, but he was playing next to literally the best ball winner in Argentina, so he didn't have a lot of work to do." And another one was just straight up, Austin got a good one. They're going to be a good team. So it seems to be in the spec of people whose opinions I really respect. It seems to be in the spectrum of this is going to be a pretty good signing. In terms of fit, it's a no-brainer. Like, I'm guessing that Josh Wolf wants to play a similar style to what we're seeing from Greg Berhalter with the national team, because they worked shoulder to shoulder for more than half a decade. And the way the U.S. national team play is with a 6 and then 2 free 8s in front of them. And Pochettino is probably a free 8. Right, he's not quite a 10. He's not quite a do everything number 8. But he's, from what I've seen, the few clips I've seen, and from the reports I've gotten, he's really smart about picking up those spaces in between the lines and releasing wingers or comboing off the center forward. Danny Pereira, who they took first in the draft, also a similar type of player. So to me, this feels like they've identified their central midfield, of course, with Alex Ring as the 6, playing deeper and kind of organizing things. I like it a lot, but I mean, there's still work to be done. They have to get some depth behind Ring, and then they have to figure out what the story is with center forward. I feel bad for Danny Houston because I crush him on the show basically every time, but like, he doesn't have the career numbers of someone who can lead the line for a good team in MLS.
This feels a little bit like what Nashville did in a lot of ways. Some not like in the overall roster build. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in the wait and see at center forward, and just kind of, they've got Danny Houston, they've got Schoenfeld, who they signed off of Minnesota United. They have John Gallagher, who had some really nice moments for Atlanta, and they're like, okay, we have Dominguez and Redis and Pochettino and Pereira, and we'll find a way to get enough out of those guys for the first half of the season to figure out what it is we actually want and need, and let the market sort of come to bear.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think with this Pochettino signing, you still have flexibility potentially to make it a true 10 if that's the guy you find and you think can be a difference, and slide him deeper and play him alongside Ring and kind of get what you can out of center forward. Or you can get a legit number 9 and play, as Doyle said, those dual 8s, and he fits in that well. I think one of the things I've seen from what I've seen from him and heard is, as well as Doyle mentioned, the ability to engage the wingers. And that's where their attack comes from. Cecilio Dominguez is their true DP that they have so far. Redis as well is supposed to be a star that they're excited about.
Jared Stroud as well.
Although Jared Stroud's probably going to be the true 10 they fall on. But we'll get there later. So he can kind of fit with what those players do. And the other thing I saw was making good late runs to be an option as a goal scorer. And so if the job for Danny Houston is the Marco Arena job for LAFC for the first 3 months of this season, you can get some goal scoring out of that midfield spot via him. And the numbers you're talking about are numbers you could buy down eventually.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at even more flexibility if you want to spend big going forward or not, because you've kind of put together a solid unit across the board. So it makes a ton of sense with everything Austin's done so far. And as well as Doyle mentioned, like the work that can be done in South America and where you can find spots and where you can find openings. So it seems to kind of fit into everything about their build.
Yeah,
and just in terms of vibes, Weeby, you were right with that Nashville comparison, because it's like they are more under the radar than what Miami were, or LAFC, or Atlanta. But if you really look at this roster, it makes sense. Like, they clearly are going for an identity, and they thought a lot about how to address depth and how to address a starting 11 and where to use their assets. I do like the way this is coming together.
I had Nashville later in the show, but I think I'm going to move them up right now, right before Felipe. We'll talk to Felipe in just a second, get the Pochettino scouting report from him as well. They signed CJ Sapong, so now that striker depth chart is like, it's Cadiz, it's Rios, it's Sapong, it's Baji, it's Don La. I mean, they're getting very deep in that sense. and they went and got Pinheiro, which I don't think we talked about a ton, to play on the right wing. All of a sudden, Nashville looking pretty darn deep. I don't know that I look at CJ and say, like, roster-changing player there, but he certainly has 10, 12, 13 goal potential in the right situation, the right team. Could potentially play wing for you if you want it as well, but is very much like that hold-up guy and then a target.
He makes a ton of sense as a signing. He also historically has played well when he first gets to a team. And so this first year, that's what you're trying to get from him. I think they have him on a 2-year deal. So it's not like a lot of long-term. I think I've seen a lot of people, not just you, use the term depth, where I don't know that having players in a spot totally means depth, because I don't think you want Dambaji starting.
No,
Abu Danladi, who I have a guarantee still on a wall in an office that no one's been in.
You think so? You think somebody didn't tear that thing down?
Potentially, I don't know. I still have that guarantee on him. I'm not saying, that these players can't be good, but I just think CJ makes a ton of sense for what they've done with MLS experienced players. He has a little more attacking quality than what they've had at spots. He fits in perfectly and is available, and so they don't have to break the bank to get him. It makes sense, especially for a team that seems to have used all their international spots, right? Because they traded half of them away and then have seemed to fill the rest. So they need to find domestic talent. CJ Sapong's one of them.
I think it is depth. We say Baji and Danladi. That's 4 and 5. Like, I don't think they're really expecting those guys to play. The question is, does Cadiz stick around, or is that loan just going to be a loan? And this is where Sapong is great insurance for that as well. But if you look at the wings, I mean, like, if you say Sapong can play on the wing, for instance, you go Pinheiro, Muil, Sapong, and then Danladi. So Danladi's 4th there. Leal, Hanwala Buwana, shout out to Anders. This is where we need that live chat function so we can just go crazy right now. Maybe a little bit less so there. But still, I think Nashville taking the next step forward. So congratulations to them. CJ Sapong onto a new club in Major League Soccer. All right, let's talk to Felipe Cardenas. He knows Atlanta United front to back, and we always enjoy having him on this show. And word is he's improved his camera situation. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be a treat. Felipe, welcome to Extra Time, man.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Oh.
It's like we're inside his house.
I know. He did his hair.
Upgraded. I comb my hair, which is, I guess it's not that rare. I do comb my hair often, but I took extra care today knowing that I would be on camera. And yes, I did upgrade my computer over Christmas. So I'm here unveiling that.
I have so many questions.
He upgraded his computer just for Extra Time.
I know.
This is what we expect from all guests going forward. Buy a computer for our show.
I didn't like my last appearance on ETR.
Really?
I was not happy with me on camera, and I'm like, I can't let that happen again.
Hey, strive for the best. That's what we're saying. We were talking about Tomas Pochettino, about Atlanta, the market in South America, but I really do have to start you with this because it struck me. I don't think I've combed my hair with an actual comb. I want to say since I was a child. It just hasn't been a part of my life. Do you go full comb? I'm more of a like mud in the hands, use your hands to shape.
I use a comb, like a old school barber comb with my hair is wet. Like it's like that knocks it out, and then you go product. Then the product does the business. That's how you get the look. But yeah, I go full comb. It looks like an old school 1940s black comb.
Anders, you can just pull me out of this because I don't think I have much relevance. So.
Do you put it in your back pocket when you walk around day to day?
No, I don't. But I should.
Yeah, that's not quite the old school way, but I appreciate it. All right, we were talking about Tomas Pochettino before we jumped on here. It occurs to me that you may have a better feel for him as a player and what this signing means, both in MLS as well as in Argentina, than we do. Walk us through your perspective on Tomas Pochettino to Austin FC.
Well, I can go back to the expansion draft. I remember Matt Doyle saying that Austin, they were doing well at the draft. Like you could kind of see the roster come to shape, but they had one hole, which was like a number 10, like a nice dynamic possession-based technical number 10. And they got that in Tomas Pochettino. Now I don't think he's a classic number 10, but he can play there. He does like to get forward. He does have, as they say in South America, he has goal. He can score. He can get up front. And I think the perspective from Argentina is that MLS and a new team like Austin is getting one of the top players in the league. This is not a comparison to Miguel Almiron, but that was the sentiment when Miguel Almiron left. It was like he was one of the top players in the league. He was not playing at a big club. He was at Lanús. Pochettino is playing at Talleres, which is not this like they're a historic club, but they're not in at the same level as River Plate and Boca Juniors or Vélez or Racing. But he has, especially in the Copa Argentina, that's where he really stood out. He was probably the top player in that local tournament before the new year. And clearly Austin likes what they're getting from him. He's a player that can get on the ball. He's really clean on the ball, technically, progressive. And he's young, and he has mobility. So I think that those are the types of players that I think really do well in MLS, that are coming over here from Argentina. Good on the ball, can play multiple positions in midfield. If you want him behind a striker, he can do that. But if you want him finding pockets, going out to the wing, just getting on the ball, Pochettino's that guy as well.
So I think we wanted to talk to you in general about South America, Argentina, the markets, the players that are available. We've seen a decent amount of movement between MLS, and you see it every year, but some of these leagues haven't played in a year. Some teams have only played in continental competition. Some teams haven't played at all. What do you make of the players that are available and the way the relationship is currently between MLS clubs and Argentine clubs or general South America?
Well, I think there's, as you guys know, there's always been a relationship with South America and MLS going back to, the inaugural season in '96. I think what's changing now is the players that are coming are getting younger. I think the Young Money Fund is going to advance that type of scouting as well. And certain teams, I think, will start to open up in different markets. So it's not going to be just focused on Argentina and Uruguay, for instance, like what the Chicago Fire did with John Javier Duran from Colombia, a 19-year-old. He might be even 17, actually.
Yeah, I think he's under. He can't even sign yet. Yeah.
He can't even sign yet. So he's 17 years old, but and these are unproven players, which I think is really interesting. They're unproven at the professional level, but they've already been identified as prospects, as players that when they that can play right away. Once, to Andrew's point, they can sign a professional contract. Duran from Chicago is a big kid. I think what's interesting about him is that he was a winger, like a 6-foot winger at one point, until James Rodriguez's dad and his youth coach at Envigado were like, this guy, he needs to play striker. And so I think you're going to continue to see that, like Moises Caicedo, who Atlanta, from what I've been told, they were really close. It was close to get Moises Caicedo, who ended up at Brighton. And that's a 19-year-old who is already a starter at the national team level, senior national team level. There aren't a lot like that, but I think that is the trend, going younger. It's even in Atlanta's case, I think the transfer fees are a little bit lower than what you expect and what you've seen from Atlanta, from Pity Martinez and Barco. They're not paying the record fees anymore, but you're getting these prospects that can step in and play. They are a bit of a project, but it's all part of this growing trend. And I think in South America, from when I talk to scouts and when I talk to even like youth coaches for the story on Duran that Sam and I did, they see MLS as a promising league for development. Like, they are clear, this is a development league. This is a league where we can send players. We know they're going to get the coaching, the organizational structure. They understand they'll be well paid. In Duran's case, his youth coach told me straight up, like, he's going to help his family with this paycheck. He understands that, but he wants to play in Europe. And his youth coach compared MLS to the Bundesliga, not as far as stature, but the way the game goes, the way the game is played. Several strikers from Colombia of that mold, kind of a big striker, can play back-to-back, a Lukaku type striker, do well in Germany. And there are a lot of strikers like that in Colombia. So new markets, Venezuela, that's another one where I think the younger players are starting to be noticed. There's a report now that Atlanta United is going to sign a 19-year-old Venezuelan, who from what I'm told, he will probably start with the Atlanta United too, but he's a dynamic left-footed winger, and I think he's the type of player that if Gabriel Heinze likes what he sees in training, likes what he sees in USL matches, he gets a shot. So the market's opening up. It's just not, as far as transfers go, South America is still struggling. Big clubs like River Plate still are not at the point where they need to sell too. Boca Juniors is a little bit more stable, but players coming over to MLS, I think you're going to continue to see that. They just might be younger. So
I'm curious, though, where do MLS clubs fit in terms of like what's new? Is it that the MLS clubs are replacing the Atlético Nacionals, the Bolivars of smaller team players on smaller clubs in their country, rather than going to that big club and then going to Europe? They come to MLS and then go to Europe? Or is it that MLS is replacing the Belgian league or the Croatian league or Ukraine in that step? Like, are those clubs reaching out to MLS clubs, or is it the other way around? How have you seen all that?
I mean, I think strong relationships have been built between MLS clubs and clubs in South America. Again, to use Atlanta as an example, Club Lanús is now a club where they have a strong relationship. Marcelino Moreno came after Miguel Almiron. Of course, you know the history of that club with MLS, with Sebastian Blanco and Vieri. So that's going to continue. I think, to your point, David, it's like, you still have, you take a club like River Plate, you take a club like Atlético Nacional. These are enormous clubs in South America that get to Copa Libertadores and they're expected to get to the semifinal round. Those clubs have very good academies. Like, they can, when they need a player, they go down to the academy, they bring him up, and he's playing over the weekend, which is what MLS strives to be. And so I think that's where MLS can start to kind of nourish their academy systems or their USL systems or just their rosters with these types of players where, well, you might have to wait to get a shot from at Racing Club. You can bid your time, but at MLS we can come here and you can play. And plus, just the money is better. The money is going to be better for them. And so you look at Hector David Martinez, the center back that Atlanta was on the brink of signing from Defensa Justicia, a left footer. You know how rare a left-footed center back is, and Atlanta was right there with him, ready for him to come in, a spot that they desperately need to fill. And he gets a phone call from Marcelo Gallardo, and that changes things. And so Hector David Martinez is an academy product from River Plate. He knows what it means to play for that club, but he knows that Atlanta is an interesting prospect. He gets a great deal. He knows that the league is going to propel him to perhaps playing abroad in Europe. But it's still the draw of playing for these big clubs, like you mentioned, David. It's still there. That for me is like such an intriguing piece of the puzzle that MLS teams are still going to have to battle that particular age group of player for their home club that might say, well, yes, you can go to MLS, but we would love to have you here, and you're going to play in Copa Sudamericana, you're going to play in Copa Libertadores, you're going to play in Clásicos, and for them, that's everything.
So Hector David Martinez is an interesting one, and I wanted to get to that one because the rumors were that reports, or we go back and forth on the terminology here, that the money from Atlanta was like 4 times the amount. Is it done? He is going to River. He said, nope, this is where I need to be. The emotional pull, the competitive pull of, as you said, Boca River and all these different things that he can play in that he knows well. Is that over for Atlanta United? And what the heck's going on? Because now I see maybe Meza's out. Yeah. Escobar is out. Like, what is happening to this roster right now? Where are the flex points? And what do you think will get done?
Yeah, Hector W. Martinez, according to reports in Argentina, multiple reports, that deal is done. He's back with River. When Marcelo Gallardo spoke the other day, he was pretty adamant that I spoke to the player, like we expect that deal to get done in the next few hours. And 24 hours later, multiple outlets were saying that was official. No club has announced it yet, so perhaps there's a chance. But
you got the Godfather though. He's the Godfather saying like, "Nah, man, you're staying with us. Come home."
And like I said recently on Twitter, like Heinze has similar pull. It's just much different when you combine River Plate and Gallardo together. Heinze and Atlanta United are going to win a lot of these moving forward, but in this particular case, it was just a very special situation where you've got a top center back that River Plate sees is like, we need him. They're trying to refresh their roster as well. They're selling players. They want to shore up the defense. Thing is, Gallardo has multiple options in defense, and Atlanta does not. So from what I've been told, just talking to sources at Atlanta, which is very typical, they have a plan B. They probably have a plan C. With Mesa reportedly moving on to San Lorenzo, which was that's his boyhood club. Now you really need that spot. You need a left center back. They just have not been able to nail that down ever since Leandro Gonzalez Perez left. So I'm sure they've already scouted and have plan B and plan C. I would expect a center back signing to happen just because it's a position of need. And I think Heinze will attempt to shore up really the spine of the team. I think everyone expects Atlanta just be this expansive team right out of the gate. They're going to score 70 goals again. And they still have certain positions that they need to fill in order to do that. I think a left winger, right winger is still something that they can look into. The striker position for me is I don't want to say unsettled. It just seems like it's a work in progress. Joseph Martinez is coming back from a serious knee injury. They're going to protect him. They're going to protect Joseph. And that's why Lisandro Lopez comes in. But again, you're relying on a 38-year-old who's going to be 38 in March, and then just a bunch of young players behind him. So that's why I think midfield to defense is really important for Heinze. And they have work to do. I think they have talent, but they need to fill those spots. The Hector W. Martinez, I guess, loss was a big one because that would have been huge. He's a left footer. He's a good defender. He can play in transition, but most importantly, very technical, very clean on the ball, playing out of the back. And that's what they've been missing for the last few years.
When you look at Heinze, because there's been a lot of rumors, there's been a fair amount of activity. Is it culture change moves with, established guys like Escobar and Meza, who they just got in last year, and the rumors around Remedi now and some other pieces that have moved? Is it that? Is it a style change? Or is it just that the roster wasn't good enough last year?
I went back this morning and listened to Heinze's introductory press conference, and he was asked a lot of questions about new signings and what do you think of their current roster. And he, again, I think he wasn't too political. I think he was very blunt in saying, I see a team that there are characteristics that a coach would want to have. I see a team that plays with a lot of effort, but changes, and he didn't say signings, but new players, those discussions were made before he gave that press conference. And he basically made it known that those moves are in the works. That's on the table. So clearly he saw a roster that he needed to upgrade in certain positions. He has a certain style of player that he's going to want to have. I think he's a coach that will have a lot more influence on players coming in than what Frank de Boer had, for instance. I think it'll look a lot more like what Tata Martino was, where he could identify a player, he could call a player, very stylistically put in a place where as soon as he's on the field, he knows what this coach wants. And I think that's the difference now with Heinze. So, I think he's going to have to manage the group and not necessarily play the way his Vélez teams were playing when he left. I mean, it took 2 years for Vélez to really get to a point where they had a style. And then you had certain players like Fernando Gago, Gaston Jimenez, who were these veteran players surrounded by younger guys that could do the really intellectual, tactical work in the middle and let guys kind of fly around and be still positional based. Atlanta's not going to do that in April. And in my opinion, I think they have to get used to each other, understand what the culture is, David, to your point. And the one thing that he said in that press conference is before he talks about tactics and philosophy, he has to form a group of players. So I think the locker room, the mentality, I know it's cliche, but this team needs to understand what this coach expects. And from there, if they believe in his tactics and it leads to wins, then you're going to see this team grow.
Can I ask you this? Is Gabriel Heinze an Ezequiel Barco guy? Do you think he will be?
I think so. Just because it benefits both player and coach. They're at a point where no coach has been the coach in MLS or in Atlanta that's gotten the most out of Ezequiel Barco. So Heinze has a chance to do that, and he's done that. He has a track record of taking younger players, putting them in position to succeed, and then they grow and they're sold on. I mean, there's proof of that at Vélez, even at Argentino Juniors when he took them to the first division. There's a group of those players that are now in Europe, and they were somewhat unknown at the time. They were coming up, in second division soccer in Argentina, and now some of them are in Spain, some are in Italy, and so I think he'll like what Heinze will like what he has in Ezequiel Barco. He's a technical player. He's going to play hard. He understands tactics. I think that's one thing that I've always said about Barco when I talk to him, when I've interviewed him. He understands tactics. And so if he's given a role, a clear role, and he's going to get what Heinze wants, he should do better. He should do better. So yeah, I think Heinze has this opportunity to be that one coach to get the most out of Barco. Now, so much has changed that I don't know his transfer value at this point, Barco, and what teams are willing to pay for a player of his age and his skill set. I'm sure he's still a valuable asset for the club. I think he can still be a quote unquote big sale. But yeah, this is the year. This is the year, in this kind of strange year that we're going to step into once again, where Barco has to really show out.
Imagine, just dream big with me for a second. CONCACAF Champions League, Atlanta United, the Five Stripes, qualification via what means? Doesn't matter. They're in. March all the way to the final. That's a platform for Barco. That's a culture building moment. That's the squad is together sort of thing. Like, what did you think when you saw this CCL draw? Not an easy one for Atlanta United.
I thought it was tough right away. I thought it was really tough. And I loved kind of like the feedback from Atlanta fans, or some were like, is it though? And others were like, this is tough. Like there are a couple of guys that were like, we're going to win both legs, 6-2 aggregate score, 5-1 aggregate score. And it's like, wow, the disrespect to Costa Rican soccer, which is very good. It's like, these are historical teams that do really well regionally all the time. And Alajuelense is first place in Costa Rica right now. They have good players. They have Brian Ruiz, which everyone knows about him. He wears the captain's armband. I think that type of player is just like so important in these types of tournaments, because he knows what it's like. He took Costa Rica to a quarterfinal in 2014 at the World Cup. So Atlanta doesn't have that type of player. They are a young team. That was one thing that Heinze said in his press conference in December when they asked him, what do you see? He's like, I see a young team. And he's used to that. Heinze likes young teams. He likes guys that are agile, mobile. They'll run through walls. They're technical. But that doesn't always translate to success in international tournaments. So, yeah, I think it's going to be tough. But Atlanta needs to play games. They need to. This is a team that needs to get used to each other quickly. So maybe this tournament will help them. It's going to break the ice really fast to put them into a situation where they're playing against a top team in Costa Rica. There's always the added advantage that they're not going to a hostile environment, probably. But still, they're not hosting in Mercedes-Benz at 50,000 capacity either. So
you mean at Kennesaw State?
Oh, exactly. It's going to become
even crazier, man.
Yeah, I know. But again, I like the draw. I like the draw just because I'm really intrigued to see how Heinze approaches that, because I think he'll see it as an important opportunity for himself and for the staff and for the players. But then like a week later, they're playing in MLS. So it's just going to be really, really interesting to see how that happens. Again, it's like history repeating itself. De Boer struggled. Like he comes in January, and a month later he was playing at Herediano in Costa Rica. They lose 3-1. It was not the start that anyone wanted. And I don't think that's the type of start that Heinze is going to want either. But there's that possibility that it's kind of like this shock to the system right away, playing against a very good team.
I remember the images watching that game, and Frank de Boer on the sideline in Costa Rica, and they're all looking around each other like, yeah, this is not what we wanted. One word answer: MLS team wins in this edition, or no?
No.
Yeah, no. I mean, fair. No reason to be brave there. All right, Felipe, tell people how people can follow, man.
Oh, hit me up on Twitter at Felipe Car. I am on Instagram too now. I'm trying to get that up and running at Felipe Cardenas SCCR. And again, subscribe to The Athletic. We're excited what this year is going to be like. We've got a lot of stories in the works. And for me at Atlanta United, there's too much to write. So hang with me, please.
Hang with them. I follow. I just want to put it out there on the gram and on Twitter. So I'm there. I'm consuming that content, Felipe. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, guys. Take care.
Oh, big thanks to Felipe. Always got to congratulate folks on being brave right after a CCL draw. Predictions, not the best idea, but we now know the CONCACAF Champions League round of 16 path to the final, all the matchups. Wednesday night, that went down. You saw the ping pong balls, all the A1, B1, A2, all that stuff. Yeah, what do you guys think? Do you want me to run through it, or should people just go look at it? I mean, I can't list out every matchup. That's bad radio.
Let's run through it, right? Top left quadrant is Cruz Azul versus what the hell team is that?
Suckered you into that one.
It's a Haitian club.
There you go. Then in that group is also the winner of Toronto versus Forge FC, which is the Canadian Championship,
Yep.
versus Leon, who were the Liga MX champions last year. Bottom left quadrant is Monterrey versus
Atletico
Pantoja.
Pantoja, yes.
That's a name. And
the
then,
DR.
then Columbus versus Real Esteli. Top right quadrant is Philly Saprissa and Atlanta versus Alajuelense. And then the bottom right quadrant is Club America versus Olympia and Portland versus CD Marathon. Some familiar names in there for CONCACAF fans.
I'm just gonna start passing the baton on these
Yeah.
kind of quasi-hosty moments. That
Doyle
you
with
just-
a big reading
I
moment,
know,
and he's
you
normally
just-
the guy who you come out of that and goes, "Great radio."
Yeah, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. But like, hey, we're live right now. We're live. So the big thing to take away just off the jump is that there's just one MLS team, maybe two, depending on Toronto. They got to get there, of course. Got to beat the Forge on one side of the bracket, and then just one Liga MX team on the other side of the bracket, where Philly and Atlanta and the Portland Timbers are. What is your first impression off this? I mean, I think John Arnold says it best when it's like, for MLS, the loser is whoever plays the Liga MX team that wasn't seeded. So that would be, if they get there, Toronto FC, and then the winner is whoever gets the Caribbean, which in this case, Liga MX wins in the draw, they win in the actual competition, they just always win. Cruz Azul got the Haitian team, and Monterrey got Atletico Pantoja, which is, basically opportunities just to sharpen the knife for them.
So I still think Columbus, who, as you mentioned, are on the side that could end up seeing 3 Mexican teams in a quarterfinal, are still favorites for an MLS side, because you look at Atlanta getting Alajuelense, who are the best team in Costa Rica right now, who have strengthened with depth in Johan Venegas and Brian Ruiz. They've got some of the best young players in Costa Rica. So Alajuelense was the one that you wanted to avoid. So you bring an Atlanta team with a new coach, potentially a whole new starting 11, and maybe not Joseph fully yet into that matchup. That's a little tough. And then you look at Philly, who just sold McKenzie and Brendan Aronson, going against the Saprissa side that is as experienced in this competition as you have. And they, again, brought Kendall Waston in, and the rumor is Francisco Calvo potentially, although Chicago's re-upped him, and Marvin Angulo. So they are a tough beat as well. And this isn't the best Saprissa side we've seen, but they're not going to beat themselves. And so you've got a Philly team without 2 huge pieces from last year where you don't know where they stand right now.
Well, Philly's the new kid in the the lunchroom too.
Yeah. They've
Like,
never
they got
been in
to
this competition.
Yeah, they got to this point they've never been before, and now they're walking into a completely different beast.
And they're not a team, not maybe that this matters as much, that has a ton of Central American or Caribbean or Mexican talent that's played in this region even. And so I think it's pretty tough to look at those two, even though they will match up potentially against each other in the quarterfinals, to see them going through all of this. And then Portland, if they had Sebastian Blanco and Niashkoda, it'd be one thing. But without those two, to see them try and make a run into a CCL final feels a little tough against probably Club America in the quarterfinals. So I still look at Columbus. They've got the best first round draw for an MLS team in Real Esteli. I think Monterrey is beatable if you assume they beat Atletico Pantoja. And then, yeah, you're in a tough semifinal, but it's the semifinal of the CCL. That's the reality. You got to beat good teams. And so I still think, for my money, they're the MLS favorites.
Esteli, probably well if you're a CCL nerd like we are. They had 4 different group stage appearances in the last decade, like back half of the last decade. 16 games, a lot of MLS matchups in there. I think they got Kansas City twice in that. They didn't win any of those games. Like 16 games, they didn't win a single one. So it would be a shocking, historic, like gut punch, what the hell just happened upset if they were to knock off the Columbus Crew. And I say all that just to set the table and just knock on a little bit of wood here, because this is the way this competition goes. Doyle, who do you think has the best shot to win?
Looking at these draws, like none of it is great from an MLS perspective, because even though Columbus have Real Esteli in the first round, they have Monterrey in the second round. And we know that Monterrey are the kings of this tournament. And they're currently second place in Liga MX. They haven't given up a goal yet this year. They are perfectly content, even under Javier Aguirre, to sit back and absorb all the pressure that you can throw at them and just annihilate you on the counterattack. They're not as reliant on that as they have been in the past, but they certainly don't mind doing it. Monterrey is just always the toughest. So that side, of this group, you would hope that one of Philadelphia or Atlanta could make a really good run, because like you said, like Gasman, like Saprissa and Heinze are there every single year, and they have a ton of experience, and they're not going to be daunted at all by the prospect of playing in this tournament. But they're also at a talent deficit against both of these MLS teams. And at some point, if you're an MLS coach and if you're MLS players, you have to make that really, really count in this tournament. So I would hope that of the brackets, like that is the place where you would find probably the clearest path. But either way, we all know that the road to the CCL final and that to the CCL title itself goes through the best Liga MX teams, and that's Monterrey, and that's that's León, and that's Club America, and that's Cruz Azul, and there's no easy way to get there. Somebody's going to have to get hot, going to have to play really, really well, and going to have to make it count.
Here's the thing that's the same as it has always been and might change. These first round of 16 games here, this series, they're going to be played before MLS teams take the field in MLS. They're going to be played basically as Liga MX teams are building up to Liguilla and have been playing for basically months at that point. So again, it's difficult for MLS. It's hard to see a clear path forward. If Joseph is back, I would look at Atlanta, because I think that this competition is maybe one that Heinze would look at and say, I like this. I think it's a really good opportunity for us. Let's show sort of who we are immediately. I'm used to environments, teams like this. I've played in conditions that are similar, if not in CONCACAF. And maybe I'm just being hopeful on that side as well. Saprissa, there is a little opening. They just fired their head coach. So that's something, I guess.
Yeah, but Atlanta
I don't
has
think
to get by Heinze first.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, no, you just
and
wouldn't bet on anybody.
They are the best team
100%.
outside of Mexico and the U.S. in
100%.
this competition. And while they do have a talent deficit, they bring Brian Ruiz off the bench. I know he's 35, but that's what you're talking about. And they've kind of put themselves in a category that I don't think we've seen in a while for a Costa Rican team. And so I think that's why you're talking about Atlanta that will have never played a game under Gabriel Heinze, having to get through that, which I just think is a step too far. And I think that's where it's tough to see a group like that get through. I mean, who's going to start at center back in that game?
Yeah, no, it's
the players aren't even on the roster yet. And so if Joseph starts, it'll be his first game in a year. If he doesn't, now you're not starting Joseph Martinez for a team.
Yeah, it's not like Joseph is the type of guy, his first game in a year, he comes out and bats a hat trick.
That is very true. One name to look out for, Jurgens Montenegro, who had been rumored to Atlanta for Paulo Heinze, who is the next great star, and there's a lot of excitement around him as a center forward for Paulo Heinze.
You know, one of the things you think about when you see this is what that group stage will mean in the future. It will mean essentially not like warm-up games in any way, but it will be additional opportunities for a team like a Philly or an Atlanta or whoever gets in here, like whoever it might be, teams that have not played in this competition before from MLS, teams that are veterans in it, to just get more sort of muscle memory against Liga MX, against the region, and to play in these instances where it's like you got to win right now, and do it in weird conditions.
Not be in preseason.
Correct.
It'll be in the fall.
Yeah.
Those games will be September, October when you're at your peak. So for teams, it won't be the first game of a new coach. And Anthony Hudson doesn't have to call it preseason or whatever.
Oh, I was going to make that joke and I forgot.
in those. And it won't be right when the players flip over. Now, it will be going forward, right, into the knockouts. But as you said, if you're a Philadelphia Union team, Mark McKenzie and Brendan Aronson would have been in the group stage. So you would move into the knockouts with the rest of the team finally having this experience going forward. The other thing I want to just throw out there, Lucas Celerayán has been in this competition. I'm just saying, he hasn't won it, but that's the type of 10 that you want. I'm pretty high on Columbus now. I'm like all in. It took me 30 seconds, and now I'm there.
You've been there. And look, I understand it. That side of the bracket is absolutely rugged, and what you would be asking Columbus in this sense is to essentially do a Toronto FC.
Yeah.
Or to do an LAFC from last year.
Because
where it's like, from the jump. Yeah. You think this is worse than what Toronto FC had?
Club León in their round of 16.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah. They would be doing the Toronto FC this year because you figure that Toronto gets there and gets León.
Because Toronto FC beat Tigres, they beat Club America, and then they lost to Chivas. So it would be 3 Mexican Giants, although that Chivas team.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Let us know what you think. Let us know.
I think Almeida's still in the league just to like taunt me about that game. I hate that game.
Yeah, 401-206-0MLS. Who has the best chance in CONCACAF Champions League? There is a new U.S. Open Cup format, and it is back, which is amazing news. Last year, 2020, for the first time in its entire history, which had been 106 years at that point, the Open Cup was not able to be played. It was heartbreaking. It was awful. What's your intro, Dave? You do these games all the time.
Yeah.
We group chat through them and tell you, like, great
I
call.
start
well
my
done.
games with the second oldest continuous tournament because the FA Cup is older, but had not been continuous. It had not run every year. I think the Scottish Cup was the oldest continuous, and then U.S. Open Cup at 106 years was number 2. And that's my open. That's why you keep it going, so that I can keep my open. Now I got to find a new open.
New open.
Yeah.
1913-14 was the first year, and 2020 was the first time they weren't able to do it. In 2021, this new format, they're sort of
Condensed.
Yeah, condensed. Playing it safe is maybe not the right way to put it, but they're making sure that it is a accomplishable thing in a very packed, sure to be crazy year, because that's the world that we live in. 24 teams will participate. That's down from 101. You know, in the past, you had this huge sort of bracket and format that was all coming to the point where MLS teams and USL Championship teams would then enter, and then you would push on for all the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. This time it's 5 rounds instead of 8 as well. So it starts May 4th, and the final is going to be at the end of June. 8 MLS teams, 8 USL Championship teams, 2 NISA, 2 USL League One, and then you have 4 from the Open Division, which brings in like League Two and some other leagues as well, and amateur sides additionally. What do you think about this format, Doyle? You have any strong thoughts, or is it hard? It's hard. Personally, it's hard for me to imagine right now.
Yeah,
what it'll look like.
I'm glad it's back in some form. I hope everybody is staying safe. I think that whittling it down and limiting travel in order to get it played feels right to me, even though I understand why some fans, especially fans of lower division sides, are a little upset by this. But it's better than not having it at all. So that's my complete take on the U.S. Open Cup at this point.
And the one thing about it that is interesting, which we've talked about a fair amount, is you've ended up with USL Championship versus Championship rounds and MLS versus MLS rounds, which I think have frustrated a lot of people because you want to see you want to see a Louisville City versus an MLS team, all that type of stuff. So I think that this is not the purpose, right? The purpose is just to get a tournament in. That's what's happening. But I think one of the side effects will be you will get to see some of these interleague matchups, NISA as well, a new league that could be fun and cool and kind of like a start to the year, right? Because as you said, the timeline is early with this tournament to happen. So it'll be something I think that all clubs, USL and MLS, can focus on, because you're not in the playoff race right at the end of the year where you don't know where to put your resources. I think this could be something that maybe adds a little bit more to the actual competition.
You just wonder how teams qualify. When there's only 8 going in, how do you decide those 8 and what plays a role in that decision? I mean, you're going to have, I don't know, is Leagues Cup going to play a role in that decision? Like if you're in Leagues Cup, you're not doubling up into Open Cup because we know the schedule is going to be condensed and difficult with a lot of midweek stuff going on. How do they make that decision? I'm not sure how they will. We shall see. Before we get to Tony Sanneh, just real quick, Bento Estrella signed by the Red Bulls. He's 14 years old. He is among the youngest signings in MLS history. The youngest, there are 4 others, or 3 others, I should say, that were 14. Wait, Bento is the 4th youngest. Yeah, go for it. They're in the rundown, so don't look at the rundown.
Freddie do?
Freddie's 1, obviously. 14 years, 168 days to DC United.
Jaquil Marshall ready?
Nope.
Ooh. Who else was?
The goalkeeper from
Eric Lopez.
Chicago. No, from Chicago.
Slonina, he's 14 years, 297 days.
What year was the 3rd signing? Like what generation?
I actually don't know. It's a Quake signing, though. I don't recognize this name right now.
They signed a really young kid last year, I think it was.
Is it Jacob?
Nope. Emmanuel Ochoa, 14 years, 191 days. Bento Estrella was signed 1 day before he turned 15. Joe Scalia was the 5th on this list. We know where he's at now. He's over in Germany. So we'll see what this signing is. They love him in the Red Bulls, per all reports. He's an 8. He's a kid that's physically able to play. at the level that they're going to ask him to play at, and we'll see what he can do in USL Championship. Baby Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Maybe see a little Dave Goss on that. All right, let's get to Tony Sanneh for some U.S. national team story time. We'll be right back. MLS story time is back. It's an AT&T 5G call to the field to the Twin Cities. Big Cat, Tony Sanneh, what's up, man? Glad to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Twin Cities holding it down, but excited to reach the rest of the country.
So I went to St. Paul, Minneapolis, before Minnesota United's first MLS season, and my assignment was to get on the ground and find out about soccer culture in the Twin Cities. And when you do that, inevitably, you're going back to the Buzz Lagos coach teams, to Manny, to you, to Amos, to this Minnesota Thunder team that really sort of changed the game in Minnesota and hung on. I want to go back further with you, though. I want you to take me back to the first soccer team that you were on. How old were you? Where was it? What was your first experience with the game? Maybe it's organized. Maybe it's in a backyard somewhere. Maybe it's at like a family event. I don't know. You tell me.
So when I was 6 years old, my dad's from the Gambia, West Africa. So when I was 6, they were like, "You're gonna go visit your grandparents." So I went to the Gambia, and I was supposed to stay 30 days. But back then, you could take a plane ticket and go and cash it in for money, right? So like it was like cash, and so they just kept cashing in my plane tickets. So I ended up staying, and this isn't funny. I ended up staying 2.5 years.
Whoa, that's no joke.
Unexpectedly?
Unexpectedly. And it kind of freaked my mom out because she was like, she didn't want to go there because she was like, I'm not going to leave my other brother here. And I don't even, back then, people didn't have phones then. I'm an old man, right? Like there were no, you had to go to a call center and stuff like that or send telegrams. So after being there for like 1.5 years, they decided to put me in school because they're like, well, you can't just sit here forever. But anyways, we had a neighborhood team. So it was like you could go up and down your block. So the kids on my street, we formed our team, right? We were the Picton Street team. And then we all had white T-shirts and we made our own tie-dyes, and that was our street. And like we'd go to the end of the block and we'd challenge the kids from the next block over in a little street soccer.
Oh my God, just this visual.
That is a lot better of a story than I expected.
Wow, blowing my mind right now. This is your first experience. You had not played before?
No, I left 1 week into kindergarten. 1 week into first grade, I went over there. So 6 years old, never saw soccer, never, we're talking 1977, and went to Africa and, started, I was in the house and they were like, you play soccer? I'm like, we don't play soccer where I come from. And they said, well, you can either sit in the house all day, you can go play with the kids in the street. Right? And they play soccer. So went out and learned to juggle, and pretty soon we had a team.
So you come back to Minnesota. How do you find the game then at that time in the United States in Minnesota?
So I was at like the parks and stuff, and you saw kids playing, but I really never played on a team. But I had skills, and then I was going to go to a different school, and you bring Buzz Lagos back into it. And my mom said, well, you're behind in your English because you didn't go to school for 2 years. So they sent me to summer school, and I had a 2-hour block or an hour block at summer school where I didn't have any classes scheduled. So my mom signed me up for a soccer class. Buzz Lagos was teaching a soccer class at summer school. And so I said, Mom, you don't go to class to play soccer. She's like, well, you're not me and you're going to class. So, and Mr. Lagos was like, wow, did you ever play before? And I'm like, yeah, with kids back in Africa. He's like, you're pretty good. He goes, would you ever want to play in a team? And I said, well, let me ask my mom. And went home and asked my mom, and my aunt bought me some white baseball Converse, and I was on the team.
Tell me about
Nobody wore white shoes. Nobody wore white shoes back then, by the way. I had like 16 studs on it, and it was like Kevlar. I didn't care, though.
Hey, that's perfect, though. You had the skills, Tony. You needed the white shoes. You needed the white boots, so everybody knew. When you walk on the field, it's like, oh, my God, that's Tony. He's got the white cleats. He's going to be better than us. What was soccer like in that moment in the Twin Cities? Like, I wouldn't imagine that it is the first choice, let's say, of most kids to play. It's not what's at forefront of their minds. It's not like in their face media-wise. Where was soccer in that era?
So like at the park and rec level, it was really recreational. So at every local community center, they had, we would say the herd mentality where the kids just run around and that was it, like in your park. And then, we would have like the club soccer, but, there wasn't that many teams in the state. Like there was one St. Paul team, one Minneapolis team, like each suburb had their own team. So, there was probably like 16 teams in the state and you played against each other. So we really got to know each other pretty well. It was kind of cool because a lot of the guys that we grew up being competitors against, and as we got older, we made it to one team and the better kids, played together. But we used to be, compete against each other. And now we respect each other. We're friends and we have this network. And we realized it wasn't the soccer, but the relationships that the sport built that helped us get where we were. And we're all still giving back in some way. But it definitely wasn't what it was today. And, there wasn't very many of us, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you that.
Especially in Minnesota.
What was it like for you in that sense? A young black kid playing soccer and trying to make his way in a sport and in a society that just it doesn't, as you said, not many people that looked like you in that scenario.
Right. Well, the good part is you could always watch Brazil on TV, right? So, yeah. So when you watch the rest of the world and you saw players, that's when it was great. It was harder to find. I had a good support system with my friends. Obviously we had to go through a lot of different, racial things here, calling people names. I mean, I actually sued my state association because I complained to the referee because the guy was calling me a before, and he told me if I said anything, he was going to kick me out of the game. So there were challenges, but I had a good support system. And I think it helped make me who I am today. I had people that cared about me and I was good. And so, that was one way I could beat you by being better.
Can I just ask who your role model was at that time? Like you're talking about Brazil. Can you bring it back to more? Was there someone in the U.S.? Was there someone around you? Was there someone you look up to? I mean, I'm looking at these Milwaukee Panthers squads and Jimmy Banks preceded you. Right. In Milwaukee. Was it Jimmy? Was it somebody else? Was there anybody that you were looking up to in an American sense?
Well, for the short time when those Minnesota Strikers was here, Thompson Usean was the baller, right? And so, he was black, he was a forward, he could score goals, and he was a baller. So that's, it's the local person that I would look up to. I was a huge Ruud Gullit fan. Obviously, he was big, but could do it all. I was a huge Maradona fan because he was just good, and he could do it all. Pele was the legend. I was a huge Jordan fan because he backed it up. So those are who I wanted to be like and who I strived and I looked at my journal the other day and I wrote a lot about those guys.
When you were playing coming up and you talked about your quality and what you could do, did you have an idea of the type of player you wanted to be, what position you wanted to play, how you wanted to affect the game? Were you pushed into things, typecast? How was that experience?
So first of all, I forgot Jean Tigana.
Ah, yeah.
So he was my other favorite. And so people don't know this about me. I was a forward, but I was small. I wasn't a big guy. I grew 2.5 inches because of malnutrition. When I was in Africa, I grew late. I grew 2.5 inches every year from 14 to 18. So, I went from being
a foot.
Right. I went from being in 10th grade, I was the slowest person on my team, to 11th grade, I was the fastest person in the state. Right. I went from being 5'8" and slow to 5'11" and lightning. Then when I was senior, I was 6'2". So, I was always a forward. Playing in Minnesota, Manny Lagos was always our center midfielder. And it's kind of weird how it changed. So the team was kind of built around him. And but I was always a passer and people saw my skills. My first high school coach, actually, I was 5'4", I weighed 98 pounds. And in 8th grade, he put me on the varsity team. And Like I was never anything but a forward, and he put me at defensive midfield. Just because I was good with the ball. And I think, when you look at a guy like Tigana, Conte, that's kind of what I did. And that helped me develop my passing skills, my field awareness. And then I went back to being a forward. And in college, then I ended up being like an attacking midfielder, so I could do more. But I was pretty bright. So, this is something that, I would go on a team and search it out. So, I remember one year in Minnesota, I'm arguing with Mr. Lagos because I'm rotating at forward with Amos McGee and Gerard. And I'm telling him that I need to play every minute of every game. And he's telling me we're all equal, so we need to rotate. And I said, well, you could always put me in the midfield because I was an All-American midfielder in college. And he was like, well, I don't think our team can handle it defensively if you and Manny are both in the midfield because you're both so offensively oriented. 2 weeks later, I went to DC United. And then Bruce Arena says, I have this guy from Bolivia that I have to play. The league won't let me cut him unless I start him. And you're a way better soccer player than we thought you were. So do you mind if you just played outside midfield for a game? I got to play him, then the league could cut him. So I did that, and I played against Done. Steve Sampson's watching. They're like, that's our next midfielder or defender for the national team because the way that he works on defense. So little change of scenery, a lot can happen. And then after that, every team I went on, I just kind of said, hey, coach, I would look at where the weak link was. And I said, coach, I could always play that position if you need it. And years later, I think I've started at the beginning of the game 9 different positions on the U.S. national team.
You just wanted to play those minutes, man. That's what you wanted. Tony's like, I'm done with the sitting stuff. I'm never doing that again. Can I just ask you this? Because I went to Minnesota and I met him, and he is such a huge figure both in the Twin Cities, but also in the development of the sport here in this country. Buzz Lagos. How would you describe Buzz Lagos?
How would I describe him? It's hard to describe him because he's like a second father to me. And I grew up with Manny, and like in the summertime, I spent 2 weeks at his house and he spent 2 weeks at my house, and we played basketball, tennis, and soccer. So he's like a dad to me. But he's like a community dad, right? He's the guy out there looking for who needs help. And, we used to have this big station wagon and then a minivan, and we all piled in, and he did whatever it took to keep the sport going, to give people opportunities. And especially, under-resourced communities. And, he saw bright spots. And if you were willing to put in the work, he was going to invest in you.
I have to ask you this because Matt Doyle, our other co-host who's not on right now, specifically wants to ask you this question. You talked about all the positions you've played for the national team and everywhere. He wants to know if you were coming up now as a player and the way the game has changed with speed and the need for technique across the field, would you see yourself as a center back through and through, or as a fullback or a wing back or something like that?
If I was at the game where it was today, for me, it was always, it's the same. It depends on what the team was. Being as fast as I was, and they play 3 forwards now, to be able to get the ball and run at people a lot would have been effective. Being an outside back is easy because physically you can do your job, and you go up twice a game and you're a hero. And if the team's not as great and you want a little bit more control, where I am mentally, I would want to be in the center of the field.
Anywhere. Yeah, anywhere. So I want to go
Being a fullback is easy for a guy who hadn't assisted in the World Cup
some of us, one of us in this interview made it look pretty darn easy.
Sure.
I'm just going to throw that out there. Before I get to DC and Bruce, and I want to jump into that, I do want to ask you about the Milwaukee Panthers, because you sort of referenced back to that, and you had this group of guys from the Twin Cities, and Manny included, go there, and you had this incredible career. And for those of the people that don't know, Milwaukee Panthers, that program, we're talking Jimmy Banks, Sasha Sarovsky, obviously all you guys from the Twin Cities, and many others. What were you in college? What was that team like in college? It seemed, from the outside looking in, when I was 3 years old, I'm looking back at history now, like a juggernaut.
In the Midwest, it was interesting because it was one of the first times in the Midwest where you kind of had a diverse team. Milwaukee is really segregated, but, you have the Polish, the Croatians. It was an experience for me to get out of my shell. As much as I thrived in Minnesota, people saw me one way. And now I could be sort of like, I was being judged by a whole nother people, not on the last 10 years, but on the last 2 weeks. But it was a good environment. Brian Tompkins, he's at Yale. He cared about his players. Sasha was about winning and really pushed us the younger kids to expect more from each other. And then I think we had a good group of people that held each other accountable, that just wanted to be good and wanted to make a difference. And, it was nice to be positive in that community because there wasn't a lot of bright spots.
Take me to DC. Take me to that move. How did that transfer come about? Because you mentioned it there. Bruce brought you in. He's like, you're a better soccer player than we thought. And immediately you're this huge piece of a juggernaut, truly a juggernaut in MLS terms, the original one.
Well, and this goes to and do I have a chip on my shoulder? Of course I do. I've always had, and I know I'm on the Hall of Fame ballot right now, and I would say, we can talk about that, but reasons why and how you get put in an area. And I knew that I was going to go in the first 10 people in the draft, but the league said we're not going to pay you more than $24,000. So I held out. It worked against me that I was from Minnesota. I believe it worked against me because I was black. It worked against me because I didn't go to a big school. But I knew I was good. I knew I was going to play. So I held out. And eventually, Bruce is a winner and he won't give up. So he was like fighting with the league to get me. And finally, one of the scouting reports came in and it was literally like, yeah, if you're looking for a tall black guy that can run fast, yeah, that's what you got. He's definitely an athlete, right? And so you can see how people will position you, right? And even as you go to, as we look at some of these bigger things or how our nation views soccer players, right? I am, this isn't for me to brag about what I did, but I believe I was good at creating a winning culture wherever I went. I know statistically when I retired, I had the best winning percentage of any player that ever played in the MLS, right? Not stuff you mentioned. At the same time, I was never an all-star, right? At the same time, as I went to Europe, I was the highest paid person on my team. I played in the championship. So, if I look at who's deciding who our players are, do I get typecast? Absolutely. Bruce saw me as a winner. He saw me that could help his teams, and he gave me an opportunity. So he just kept saying, we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen. And when it happened, it was great. And I went and the hardest thing for me was I didn't start my first championship game there. I got injured and then he didn't start me in the final. And I came off the bench and scored. And after that, I never didn't start another game where Bruce Arena was the coach.
So what was that locker room like? Marco and Heinze and Harks and Pope and you could keep going. There's so many names. What was it like to be in that locker room in that moment in time?
What I would say is I played on a lot of teams. I played in Champions League teams. I played in Europe. I played in the national team. That DC United team may have been the best team I've ever been on. Marco was by far the best player that I've ever played with. He's a G. I just got he'd be like, run. I'm like, the moment I'd stop and say, Mark, he'd be like, I just told you to run. The ball's going to get there. Don't talk back. Right? I'm like, okay, right? And you had guys like Harks that broke down barriers, that were leaders, guys that knew their roles, like Richie Williams, so underappreciated. If he was playing today, like what's the difference between him and a guy like Conte? Jaime Moreno, probably one of the top 3 forwards ever in the league, score, run. Eddie Pope, Jeff Hughes, Carlos Llamosa, Raul Diaz Arce, Roy Lassiter, Roy Whiteley. It goes on. There was a lot of talent, and practice was the best part of being on that team. Jesse Marsh, if you came out of practice with bragging rights, like you did something special, and you look forward to coming to practice to get bragging rights. It was special, and it was a good team, and I truly believed it helped me develop.
So we've talked a lot about the history of clubs over the last year, and we've talked a lot about Marco Echeverri, which is well deserved. We've also had, we did best players in club history and league history and positions and stuff. And Eddie Pope's come up a lot. Not a lot of people that listen to this show, I think, watched him at his peak. And I think we've talked about he had, offers from Europe and chose not to go and came to this league. You tell people a little bit about what he was like as a teammate, what he was like as a player, how good maybe he was.
Right. We were sort of, we came up together. What he reminds me of is like Desai, right? He was fast, he was strong, and he did his job. And he didn't need to do more than his job. He did his job, and you never had to worry about him. And I think when I moved to right back, it was great because, normally you have to help the players next to you, right? And so you risk on how far you need to leave your man to be by the other man in case he gets beat. With Eddie, I could be 2 steps farther away because the likelihood of him getting beat, and even if he did, I would be able to get there in time. So it helped me be a better defender with my position. He was fast. He was always one of the faster people on our team, good in the air. Again, in big moments, he showed up, as he showed, like we both scored in the finals, in the championship games. His demeanor was just about getting the work done. He's all business. Quiet guy unless you got close to him, but highly intelligent, really read the game very well. What I would say about Eddie is you don't want to cross him. There were some days when
who
Eddie
crossed Eddie and paid for it.
I even remember just like, I'm like, Eddie, we got a game on Friday. You go into a bad tackle. He was not afraid. Like if you went into a bad tackle with Eddie on Friday, you would be in jeopardy of not playing on Saturday because he would come back. But there was times, I remember Richie Williams and was spirited and other people, but Eddie wasn't going to back down and he wasn't going to take any and at the same time, he played by his own rules, and that was respect his space and his ability to inflict pain on you. And so I think as a quiet character, people were scared of Eddie because of physically what he was. And he didn't talk, so you never knew what he was thinking. He could outsmart you in fear. And I think he's underrated with his ability. He was really efficient with the ball. So it wasn't like he was dribbling through 1,000 people or making these 60-yard runs, but he never lost the ball. He was very efficient.
So, sorry, because I know we want to go other places, but in your time or the time around, who's the greatest center back in national team history? U.S. men's national team history.
Yeah, I would say if I had to play with any player that's played to date, I would pick Eddie.
Okay. I have him there, but I've not been there.
I think we're putting him on the Mount Rushmores for DC for all sorts of different things. You were there for this is the dynasty, right? Like you weren't there for 99, but you were there 96, 97, 98. You lifted a bunch of stuff. What is what's the most memorable moment for you in DC? The one, if you kind of had to sum it all up, and it doesn't have to be on the field. It could be off the field. It could be part of a celebration. It could just be a relationship. It could be anything.
For me, there was kind of like personal turning points. And I would say at the second year and the beginning of the third year, I think the second year in the final, we had sold out 56,000. I had an assist on the first goal, and I scored the game-winning goal. And I looked up, and my 10 best friends were sitting behind the goal, and the stadium's going wild. And I had done it before, and it was just like joy, and I knew we were going to win. And then a third moment to me was where I kind of knew that my time had passed. The first game of the 98 season, now I went from being a role player to nationally recognized to scoring in the final, and I knew I could do it on both ends. I was always smart enough to defend first and go up when needed. We played Miami, and they were they were an expansion team, and I had an assist and a goal. And I made this run, and it was like a 90-yard overlap, and I tried to do a no-look pass from Marco laughed at me because he goes, "You passed the ball, and then you did this." And it just made me feel like I was comfortable and I was embraced and part of something really special. I knew that it was something really special.
All right, let's go to look. We have so much. We could do this for like an hour and a half.
We can't do it all,
Tony. That's the sad part. It's like, how do we now decide what we want to talk to you about? Maybe we'll just have to do this again. You blazed the trail to Germany, to Hertha, to Nuremberg after that. What was that journey like for you in that sort of like, 99, 2000 zone when it's not like it is today? For you to go into these cultures, being who you are, just take me into your shoes in those moments.
Well, I think, when you go somewhere, and I always say, like, if you want to get better, leave everything you have to go do something. Guess what? 100% of your effort is going to be to be successful. Getting through the loneliness as a soccer player when you're playing in the Champions League, life is good no matter what, right? Like, that's who you are. That brings you joy, and it starts to, define you. I played in an exciting time. Again, it's weird with the lack of social media exposure, even television, where I don't think the American public really saw me, play whether I was like captaining my team in Nuremberg or, beating a Leverkusen team that was in the Champions League final or assisting on a Champions League goal against Chelsea and playing against, Rivaldo. So it was a different time. And, people say, like, how was it? I don't know if my smile can get any bigger. Like, I enjoy life, right, in every possible way. And I've done what I wanted to do the way I wanted to do it. And I've been truly blessed. The sport's been really good to me. And, like I said, part of it is I don't need to prove anything to anybody because I've been there. And, some of my favorite times are getting back together with the old crew because you can look across the locker room with each other. And it's the same way like when I used to play on the field. And once I knew I was faster than everybody, you kind of look at somebody and look them in the eye. And he just gives you that look, and he's like, "It's going to be a long day," and you're like, "Yes." And be able to look at your teammates and you get it, right? You get it, and it doesn't matter what the media says. It doesn't matter what the blogs say. Like, at the end of the day, you're going to go in the battle. Who they're going to call, and who you're going to come out of that fire pit with, and that's what it was about being there. And I enjoyed life, and I don't know if you guys heard stories. I used to have a bar there. It's friendly people. A lot of Americans came there to stay with me. So,
time out. We were like, oh, we might have to wrap this just for time reasons. But this is now the Anders say nothing. Tell us about the bar. What was the name of the bar? Where was the bar? What was the bar like?
The bar was called Leibniz Bar. It was like a block off like the main street in Berlin. It was
what a life.
Sort of a tax write-off, and it was kind of like an American bar. So all the NBA players, a lot of the North Carolina players played in Berlin there. So they would come in. And it was kind of like an American hangout. At the same time, my my GM would call me to his office, and he's like, "Tony?" I'm like, "Yes." He said, "We heard you like to have a good time." And I'm like, "Yeah, doesn't everybody?" Like, "We heard that you like to have a good time past 3 or 4 in the morning, 4 or 5 days a week." And I said, "Oh, I don't know where you heard that from." He's like, "Well, you have this bar, and I'm not sure if that's the right place for you to be." And he's like, "All the players are there, and people can see you, and there's smoke." I said, "I see." I said, "But, I'm alone. I go there to eat, to be around Americans." He's like, "Well, every time we see you in the bar during the week past 10 o'clock, it's going to be $10,000. So we're just letting you know." So the big joke was, we'd be in there at night and everyone would say, "Hey, Dieter's driving by." Dieter Heinze, he's the brother of Uli Heinze. He's like our GM. He's like, "He's driving by," right? And I would like hit the floor and crawl out the back door and get in the car and go home. I'd get home and they called me to say, "Yeah, we were just joking."
Oh man.
But it was like like I said, I've always tried to live supporting my teammates and being around a positive culture. And Berlin was a great city to do it in.
So you've been everywhere. Now we need to know where you are now, because you've got the logo behind you. You've been doing some awesome work. So tell us a little about it.
Well, I'm in the Twin Cities. At this community center, we've taken over the city. We're doing a $10 million renovation. It can be the safest field in the Twin Cities. We put an extra rock pad in there. It's going to be a FIFA approved field, a dome, and it's been -0. If you guys come to Minnesota, bring a hat.
It's 1 degree here, and I know that's nothing for you, but I'm
yeah.
hurting.
Yeah, so we're going to have an indoor fields, computer lab. We do free summer camps for over 10,000 kids here. So really hoping move the sport of soccer through at the grassroots level. We're also big in education and developing teachers of color, food. We've served over 2 million pounds of food. So really hope supporting the community, but soccer is kind of like what drives this engine, and it's my like creative piece of it, and will always be part of the organization. But I think anywhere you can have a community that supports the whole community, but soccer is a major driver in it, that's the way that we instill it institutionally. So it becomes like a normal thing, not, oh, those guys are doing some soccer thing. No, it's a normal community organization, and we do soccer because everyone should be doing soccer.
That's the Sanneh Foundation. Go check that out in St. Paul. I am curious before we let you go, Tony, and we talked a little bit about this. You know, the Black Players for Change in this last year have really pushed things forward in MLS and shined some lights into some corners where it needed to be shined. What do you think of the work that they've done, the opportunity for young black people in this country to be involved in this game, and then the opportunity also for people like yourself and all these players that have incredible resumes to have roles that maybe haven't been available or that just haven't materialized for them in the past?
Right. So, yeah, I'm really proud of those guys to step up, because so often, like, we're worried about the repercussions of speaking up. And so I, along with some other African-American leaders, founded an organization called SCORE. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a growing group of African-American leaders and professionals in the game of soccer and broadcasting, to kind of bring all the pieces together, the Black Players for Change, the Black Coaches Association, to really have a collective voice on behalf of people of color in the game of soccer. If you look at the recent hires, you know, not one African-American was hired with any of these head coaching jobs. So although they're going to say that it's a priority, the numbers just don't back it up. And so we want to support the players, not only while they're playing, but to put them on a path, because, you know, we'll hear stuff like, you know, what is your resume to get this done? And, you know, I don't want to out anybody, but there's been a lot of players that have been given jobs because they were friends with the owners, right? And it seems like there's two sets of rules. So we can look at the qualifications, but there's a lot, you know, like, you know, and at some point I'll go back in the game. You know, I'd like to see Kobe Jones have a leadership position in the game. He's given back so much. You know, I know Eddie's worked on the agent side, but I really think that he needs to be on the institutional side of the game, or for the national team to be, you know, what are we trying to do, right? Like, if you look at guys like Eddie Pope, myself, DeMarcus Beasley, Gooch, our whole goal is to replicate us. So how are you going to replicate us without our voice, right? Or you want us to tell you how to do it, but you don't want to include us. So it's a challenging time. And the league has said that they're going to be positive going forward. And so I really appreciate the efforts Don's made. You know, I personally, along with Eddie, are representing SCORE on an MLS diversity committee to help grow the game. And we're thankful that he asked us to be a part of that. So our voices will be there. And everything that they've said they want to do is going in the right direction. But like a lot of corporate America who, you know, made a big deal after the George Floyd murder, we'll see if anything changes in 2 or 3 years. We're optimistic, but we're kind of coming together on our own to make sure it happens. So you'll hear a lot about SCORE, Black Players for Change, and really, you know, we're excited that there's so many people that believe in equity and understand that the world is going to be a better place if we're all given an equal chance.
before I let you go, I have to ask you, you said it there, you want to get back into the game in that way at some point. What would you want to do? What would Tony Sanneh think is the right place for him in this game, in this country?
I could do three things. One, I could join a coaching staff. My specialty is building relationships with younger players. We have so many young players that they come in, they can't get on the field because they can't get it right, and in 3 years, they're not young anymore. And we take some younger guy. I know what the difference is of being a USL player and being a national player, and it's not a lot. And so I would want to be on a coaching staff focused on the 16 to 24-year-old and making them professionals. And part of that is developing them as people. The other thing that I wouldn't mind doing is you look at more of technical director, GM. I believe it's about building culture inside of an organization. So you can build it on the field to move to the front office, or you can build it in the front office to move on the field. But I believe if you can build positive culture around winning and being a good person, you can build a good organization. And so if somebody looked at my past and my career and thought that I could come in and help them do that, then I would be interested in those kind of opportunities.
I look forward to seeing you in that spot, seeing what you can do, Tony. Doing great work in the Twin Cities. My God, we didn't even talk about the World Cups and the national team on this show.
Tony, we gotta have you back.
I know
Sorry
we're
for
gonna
wasting your time.
we're gonna have to have you back. But the stories are incredible, and now I'm just honestly kicking myself that I wasn't of age and able to travel to Berlin in those Hertha days to stay up to 3-4 a.m. at Tony's bar, kicking it with all the Americans in Berlin. That sounds like the most amazing experience of all time. Tony, thank you so much for.
Allegedly.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
allegedly. He was home by 10.
Allegedly.
No confirmation here. We don't know if he was there. He was at home at 10 p.m., man. He was in bed. He
He
couldn't
just
answer
owned the
phone.
place. That's
He's trying to
different.
get some good sleep. All right,
Allegedly.
Tony. Appreciate your time, man. Everybody out there, the Sanneh Foundation in St. Paul, go check them out. Check out the work they're doing. If you got some spare funds laying around, you're thinking, I want to support a soccer-based organization that helps the community, this is a great one to look at. Tony, we appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Oh, MLS Storytime is back. So if you have someone you would like us to talk to pull history out of, let's say, or good anecdotes or whatever it might be, hit us up, 401-206-0MLS, extra time at MLSsoccer.com. I am open. I welcome suggestions. It's my favorite part of the show, walking down memory lane with these guys, and women as well. So if you have those, let's do that. I hope that there will be a couple going to the National Soccer Hall of Fame. That's what my ballot reflects. Let's get to the mailbag. We start with a legend, Dan Stelly, who says, I need a power rankings for places you've recorded the pod. What would be the number one? And I will start. Number one is clearly a hotel room after MLS Cup.
I knew you were going to say that.
That is the best place to record the podcast. We've done that many times, whether it be after All-Star games, whatever. You could throw in an Airbnb into that. I remember a Red Bulls Sporting Kansas City U.S. Open Cup final in which we like just right under the deadline got about 5 or 6 pizzas delivered, had a bottle of Brown, and just sat in that living room and recorded extra time, and that was a magnificent experience. So that would be my easy number one, and I would say Green Room with Bobby and the two of you guys would be my number two, and Bobby clearly not paying any attention whatsoever.
On the field for an Open Cup in Houston was pretty cool.
Oh,
that was dope.
We also had a phase where I think it was just you and me, Weeby. I don't know where Doyle was. Oh, maybe Doyle was on the phone in California, and we would record in basically a phone booth. So me and Andrew would be on top of each other.
Yes.
And then we would record the show in the MLS office phone booths, which was
and
ideal.
that would be, you'd have a lot of MLS employees rolling past us, looking in there, being like, I have a conference call, and you guys...
They're like, you guys are
every
talking
Monday
about the things we do.
Every
Can you
Monday and
please
Thursday,
stop?
you take over the prime conference room in this spot for like 6 hours. How can this possibly
Just
work?
upgraded from phone booth to conference room. Look
Yeah.
at that. Memory's a little fuzzy.
Well, no, there were the phone booths. That's when we couldn't get the conference room. But when we
Right.
could camp out in the conference room, we absolutely would do that. Do you have a number one? Doyle, do you have a number one podcast? Like the one that you remember that, I mean, it could be the Bobby dies on the floor.
Yeah,
like,
exactly that one. Post 2018 MLS Cup. If you go back and listen to that, you could hear Bobby Warshaw dying in real time. Like that was
there's gurgling.
Absolutely incredible.
Doyle, I don't get any love for carrying the gigantic equipment we used to have from San Francisco to the Bay Area, on the
that's
court
true. And
to come to your place.
And you like refused to sit on the couch. You like demanded to sit on the floor.
Yeah.
Demand is such a
no.
I'm
Like
not gonna
I
deal with
was like,
this.
do you want to sit on the couch? And you were like, no, I'm good on the floor.
Because the
And then
outlet didn't reach.
Rebecca was like scandalized by this. She started like dragging chairs over to you, and you're like, no, I'm good. I'm just.
I'm
gonna
pretty
sit
sure
on
I
the
put
floor.
in the open after that. You
Oh
yelled
my
about me being on the floor.
He's just a big cross-leg guy. Just like, get a little stretch in, make sure the hips are nice and loose. All right, what else we got? I know we got to get out of here. We're running out of time. Anders is in the chat.
Yeah, one quick one. We talked about Piatti, where he would fit. JR from Florida says if someone's going to bring Piatti back, I think Orlando would be a good fit. He'd have to accept that super sub role, as you said, but you could rotate him and Nani, keeping them both fresh, running with a lot of gas throughout the season.
I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense, but and I don't know if Nani wants to be rotated.
That's fair. Do we think that he could play like a forward role in any way in his old age?
If you go to like a 4-4-2, but not if he's going to lead the line as a center forward in 4-2-3-1.
Bring Daryl back, baby, and play Piatti off of Daryl DK. That is like, this is what Football Manager is for. I would be in there just simulating entire seasons.
But also Chris Mueller, some time with the national team. Also some rumors around him, maybe what his future is, things like that. So you have kind of two spots to rotate him through. It's interesting for a club who's not going to make a lot of big moves, right? Who had a good year last year. So that's, as we said, I think Piatti would work on every team in MLS.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for us today. Thank you to Tony. Thank you to Felipe. Thank you to Anders for letting me drag this show into a longer than we had planned. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Hit us up with any and all queries for the mailbag. Anders, come on. He says I'm not welcome, but I'm welcome. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.